June the 13th, 2023. Guys, I thought the last few days of images were incredible. This is right in there with them. Look at the amount of smoke that's coming down through the central U.S. Now, I did quite a bit of reading about the weather patterns today, and the systems in the Pacific Ocean to your left there are changing very quickly. They're talking about dips in the Canadian weather system, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing now. Look at that smoke coming down through the Midwest. Guys, I don't know how you're dealing with it. You're probably getting some incredibly orange sunsets right now. And what I'm seeing, if you notice, something that's a little different. We've got one system pulling off, and it's going to end up on you guys. You're probably seeing it in New York now, and it will be crossing over Manhattan Island throughout the night, and you can see it moving up the coast. But notice right here, it's like an eddy in a river. This smoke is coming down. Some's being pulled off to the east. A lot of it, though, is moving back north and west, guys, so you're getting this recirculation effect right here. Now, in this weather study I was doing today, and if we're talking about extreme drought across the planet, guys. Here in our wheat belt, the wheat's dry in Russia and in Ukraine, and you had the flooding, but it's dry there, it's dry here. The imports of wheat this year will not come from our wheat belt. They're going to come from overseas because of the drought, and then you see what's happening now. You're blocking sunlight. And I don't know what all is being put into this soup mix, but I'm going to move this up towards Canada, this particular satellite. But notice this right here. I'll put it back into motion. The thickness there. Incredible. And that's what's coming down now, just crossing the Canadian border. Check that out. Check this out. This is up into Canada, across the central United States, or above the central U.S. And you're seeing, you've got British Columbia, you've got Alberta, and then Saskatchewan there. But look at the smoke. I really don't know what to say, guys. Plus, one of the things that we have not talked about as far as how these systems or these firestorms have started in all of these areas, we are now coming out of what may have been a predicted grand solar minimum. And I've talked about it for years, talking about each solar cycle was getting weaker and weaker. It's every 11.8 years. And there's charts showing that each one has consecutively been smaller than the one before. We're in solar cycle 25 now. Solar cycle 24 was getting weaker than 23. It was weaker than 22. The prediction for this solar cycle 25 was to be weaker than 24, which would continue the global cooling, or the grand solar minimum. And what has happened, guys, we have now kicked out of grand solar minimum, and we're rising up. I did a video a few nights ago about the uptick in the solar activity, and it was showing that we were already in solar cycle 25 having higher amounts of radiation, things like that, solar flares, than we did in 24, and we're early into 25, so that's already telling us that we are coming out of that, or at least temporarily coming out of the grand solar minimum. This cycle is stronger. I'll show you some charts. Now, you're looking at a chart, guys, back on March 5th of this year. It says solar cycle 25 exceeds all predictions. That's what we're dealing with, the drought. I think it's going to affect the hurricane season this year. It's going to be pretty strong. Again, we're seeing the loss of wheat. We're seeing the loss of corn crops here in the U.S. We're looking into famine. Biblical. But you're looking at a chart. Now, in the top, this is solar cycle sunspots in the progressions, and you can go back to 2012 here. This is solar cycle 24, and then the amplitude rises here into 25. It's also, it's already exceeded the average. In other words, what I was saying is each solar cycle, this is 24, has been decreasing. 23 was higher if you go back and look at the charts, and each of these rises in this 11.8 year cycle has been getting lower. But now we have exceeded 24, and we're not at the peak of 25, which will occur right about there, where it's saying 2025 right there. And this thing's on the rise. Now, again, goes to Malachi chapter 4. But if you look at the situation with the fires, I know a lot of them are man-made, and I have a whole nother video about what I think is happening on that side of these fires. But you think about the solar radiation, especially as you get further north. It enters the poles. You have gaps in the poles, and that's where the electromagnetic lines of force enter. That's why your compass works. Well, when you see auroras, you see a lot of them in Canada, even the mild ones. Now, as radiation coming down along the aurora belts, or the extent of the auroras as far as coming down through Canada, and sometimes they come into the U.S., and we saw that this year already, where people on the Texas-Mexican border were filming the auroras. But in the area of Canada, especially along where we're seeing these fires, we have the North American craton boundaries. But on the inner part of that, could it be an excess, just a theory, which again goes back to a theory that I had before the scientists, and they still won't admit that solar flares causes earthquakes. But what I'm thinking now is we're rising back up. We know it will not be by water, it will be by fire, but we're rising back up in solar activity. And are we going to see this radiation penetrating into the northern hemisphere just as we see the auroras? In other words, that is solar energy. That's coming into the polar sections of the Earth, stronger than anywhere else. Would that have an effect on the pattern of these fires or help it along? It would be interesting to tie some of the fire outbreaks that we're seeing through the Canadian provinces with the borders that we can see on some of the software that shows us the extent of the auroras. In other words, you can see them further north or further south. And how does that affect all of this? But guys, again, solar cycle 25 exceeds all predictions. We are out of grand solar minimum, and we should have been thinking about it. Wasn't that it wasn't thought about, but we were following the patterns of all the previous cycles, and they were declining, and the predictions. And the red lines that you're seeing here were the predicted sections, or the predicted strengths of this solar cycle we're in now. Check that out. Far exceeds it. So, again, not by water, but by fire. And I think we're starting to see that build up. Now, I would go a little deeper into some of the other things that ties this in right now, but I didn't get much sleep last night, guys. I've got to get up at 4:30 in the morning and be in Jackson, Mississippi for surgery about daylight, and it's going to be, I've got to get a little bit of rest. So you guys think about me, say a prayer, guide the surgeon's hand. But I'm planning on being back in a few days. They're only going to keep me tomorrow and most of Thursday, and I'll be in Thursday evening if all goes well. So I plan on being here. I've got a lot of beautiful family and fur babies and everything that I need to take care of. But guys, I think this is very serious. Now, if you go to warnews247.gr, you can see that Russia's kicking butt. What's going to happen there, and the West is pushing the bear, I mentioned this last night, to retaliate in a massive way. And I think they think that they can retaliate, but guys, that 100,000 men group that they were putting together to attack, most of that's gone. Most of those people are either retreated or dead, and all of the equipment that entered that battleground is gone. And what happened, I looked at the maps today, was you look at the battle lines. Russia's on the one side, the east side, and the west side of that. About 8 or 10 miles was where the Ukrainian forces were putting together their men, all of the Western weapons that were coming in. Russia knew it. So when they came in, we have to remember that as it's night here, it's day there, vice versa. But as they came in yesterday, they were wiped out again. Billions of dollars of equipment, thousands of lives for the demonic destruction of the planet. But now we're seeing God take over with the solar cycle change. Things are about to change, and we got, if you haven't read Malachi chapter 4, you need to read it, because that is how he's going to shut down these demons. Not by fire, but not by water, but by fire. And I think have very strong feelings about that. But guys, I'm going to end it here. I'm going to try to get a little rest. Probably won't, because it's always concerning. You understand where I'm coming from. But we're watching it, guys. You watch it. It's a heads up. You guys be safe.